皆さん、こんにちは。Welcome to Speak Japanese Naturally. I'm Fumi, a Japanese teacher who organizes a Japanese learning website that now has over 1,000 learners. I often get questions like, what should I do next? I've learned hiragana, katakana, and basic sentence structure. Or, how can I learn pitch accents of words? How about pitch accent changes in verb conjugations? And so on. To answer these questions, today I'd like to introduce a learning method called immersion. In this video, Create Your Japanese Brain, I talked about the importance of creating your Japanese brain using zooming in and out concept. Many people said it was a game changer or an eye-opener. So I highly recommend you watch this if you haven't watched it. And immersion that I'm going to talk about today is how you can create your Japanese brain, how you can train your Japanese brain. It's a way of learning language that I found very effective. I know that most of my audience is beginners, so this video is meant for beginners. But if you never tried immersion or have struggled to apply it to your learning, then this video is worth watching because I'm going to talk about what immersion is, what outcomes you can expect, and when and how you can apply it to your daily life. So actually, this video is for beginners of immersion. Now let's get started. First, the definition of immersion in order for us to be on the same page. The definition from Cambridge Dictionary is the process of learning a language or skill by using nothing else but that language or skill. I think this is a traditional way of explaining the word, but I feel that it is used in a different way now when you say immersion as a means of learning a language on a personal level. When an institution says they apply immersion education or immersion programs, they mean they use the target language to teach not only the language itself, but also math, social studies, or science. So when an institution uses the word immersion, it's the way they teach or how much they use the target language to teach other subjects. But when it's used on a personal level, it's used to describe a learning method which consists of consuming a lot of content in the target language, such as dramas, animes, YouTube videos, podcasts, books, and so on. So you immerse yourself in the target language. From now on, when I say immersion, I mean this personal level usage. Living in a country where your target language is spoken doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing immersion. If there's not many chances to talk to or listen to native speakers, you're not doing immersion. If your work is done in your native language, or if you don't have to use the target language at work, it's not immersion even if you're living in that country. Whether you can immerse yourself or not doesn't depend on where you live. You can do it wherever you are, which means you can start it from today. Before talking about how to start immersing yourself, let's think about what outcomes you can expect from immersion. Here is what I think you can expect. 1. Your listening skill will improve if the content you consume has audio. 2. Your vocabulary will expand and your knowledge of it will deepen. 3. Your cultural understanding will deepen. 4. Your pronunciation, including rhythm, pitch, accent, and intonation, will improve. There are only good things. Let's see one by one. 1. Your listening skill will improve if the content you consume has audio. If you watch a lot of dramas, animes, YouTube videos, or other content that has audio, your listening skills will improve. That's for sure. The reason you can't understand what you hear is either you don't know the word or the expression, or the actual pronunciation of the word or the expression is different from what you imagine. The more you listen, the more chances you'll get to encounter a certain word or expressions so that you learn them. The same can be said for the pronunciation changes. For example, 暑すぎる is actually pronounced as 暑すぎる, or そんなこと is often said as なこと, 私 as たし in conversation. so you'll get used to those sounds. 2. Your vocabulary will expand and your knowledge of it will deepen. You'll encounter a lot of new words and phrases while consuming content. Basic vocabulary appear again and again, so you'll learn them eventually. What's more is that you'll learn how a certain word is used in a certain situation through immersion. Whatever you watch, listen to, or read will have a specific context. So you'll learn vocabulary with context. That knowledge is strong. It's beyond just knowing the definition from a dictionary. For example, Japanese has a lot of onomatopoeia. Doki doki, waku waku, za za, kira kira, koro koro, goro goro, sara sara, zara zara. Doki doki and waku waku might be easy to understand, but how about koro koro, goro goro, sara sara, zara zara? When do you use them? You need a situation to help you picture it. Not only that, visual aids will be very helpful, so immersion helps. And because you learn vocabulary within a situation, you'll be able to differentiate a certain word from a similar word, like sarasara from tsuya. Both of them are used to describe someone's hair. But when do you use sarasara? When do you use tsuya? Now you need some context. The more you encounter these words, the more situations you collect in your brain, and you'll be able to differentiate them. Another thing is that you'll acquire expressions unique to Japanese. For example, expressions like コーヒーが入ったよ or ビールが冷えてるよ. I say コーヒーが入ったよ to my husband to let him know that the coffee is ready. コーヒーが入る might sound like coffee is a living thing and it gets in the cup by itself. But the reality is I made the coffee. But we don't say コーヒーを作ったよ, the direct translation of I made coffee, unless you are a character from Haruki Murakami. He uses this kind of exact translation from English in his books, and he writes in Japanese in a way that closely mirrors English. This creates a new and unique style for Japanese readers, and at the same time makes his work easy to translate into English. I think this is one of the reasons why his books are so popular. Let's go back to the sentence ビールが冷えてるよ. The direct translation is something like beer is freezing. But the meaning is there are cold beers, so you can have them. You'll understand the meaning from the situation, and eventually you'll acquire these expressions, at least in a passive way. 3. Your cultural understanding will deepen. Through immersion, you learn about Japanese culture because you'll consume a lot of Japanese content. Language is a part of a culture. For example, we say 行ってきます when we leave our house, and the people who see us off say 行ってらっしゃい. Everybody says this, so you'll learn those expressions through immersion. Moreover, this exchange sometimes occurs outside of our house. If I see a kid from our neighborhood walking to school while I'm taking out the garbage, I say 行ってらっしゃい and they respond 行ってきます. This type of communication is very common. The more content you consume, the more you learn about Japanese culture. 4. Your pronunciation, including rhythm, accent, and intonation, will improve. I think first, listening skills improve and you learn the sounds. And when you try to produce the sounds when speaking, you can reflect on what you've been listening to, which is a lot, and it helps you pronounce sounds close to what you've been hearing. There might be more benefits, and the important thing is, I can't find any negative aspects of immersion. With immersion, more is always better. So as long as you're not doing so much immersion that you're forgetting to go to work or take care of your family. Now let's talk about when and how you can apply immersion to a daily life. But before that, let me clarify the types of immersion. There are 2 types of immersion, active immersion and passive immersion. Active immersion is when you're focusing on content 100%, while passive immersion is when you're consuming content while doing something else. For example, For active immersion, you read a book or watch a short anime with captions in Japanese on and look up words when it's needed. You're paying full attention to the content. For passive immersion, you're listening to podcasts or something else while doing cooking, cleaning, exercising, driving. So your attention is not 100% on the content, but your attention is still mostly on it. One thing to keep in mind is that listening to something as background music might not be beneficial as immersion. If you don't pay attention to what you're listening to, no matter how much you listen, it might lead to nothing. When you're listening to something that you don't understand, you'll start thinking of other things. And when you're thinking of something else, you're not learning the language. So listening to something that you don't understand at all might be meaningless as a language learning method. And for beginners, especially for real beginners, I don't recommend passive immersion because it's highly likely ending up as background music. Passive immersion doesn't have visual aids, so it's more difficult. Thus, it's easy to lose focus. For real beginners, I recommend active immersion, which means you need to find time to actually sit down and actively engage with Japanese content. So what exactly can you do? It depends on how much a beginner you are. If you're someone who's just decided to start learning Japanese, I recommend you watch Japanese content with subtitles in the language you understand and try to pick up words you hear multiple times. At the same time, start learning hiragana, katakana, and basic sentence structure. For sentence structure, I recommend this video, Create Your Japanese Brain. Again, in the video, I explain how you can create a sentence in Japanese in comparison to an English sentence. Even if you're not a beginner but have some trouble creating your own sentences, this video really helps. If you're someone who's already learned hiragana, katakana, and knows basic sentence structure, I think you can start immersing yourself using content for beginners. This is one of my walk and talk videos. You'll see Japanese and English at the same time, so you can compare words that you don't know. I use mostly N5 to N4 level grammar in those videos, and sometimes N3 level vocabulary. So there should be a lot of words you don't know. One thing to note is that it's okay that you don't understand everything. Rather, you need to get used to being in ambiguity. There should be a lot of words that you don't know, especially at first, but it's normal. I don't want you to be discouraged. Just try to pick up words you know and try to add some new words to your brain when you hear the same word multiple times. My videos have furigana. Furigana is this, the reading of kanji. It's very helpful. You get familiar with kanji and sentences with kanji gradually. You'll also notice that kanji has the effect of breaking up sentences, which makes it easier for us to read. When you come to Japan, you'll see kanji everywhere, so it's worth getting familiar with kanji. For basic knowledge, kanji has multiple readings depending on how it is used. So you'll see different furigana for the same kanji. It might sound intimidating if you think you have to memorize all the readings, but you don't have to force yourself to remember everything from the start. You'll encounter the same kanji again and again if they are basic kanji, and those are the ones you should try to learn first. I'd like to tell you about another thing, which is pitch accent and intonation. Pitch accent is changing pitch within a word, and intonation is changing pitch across a sentence. Pitch accent in Japanese is similar to stress accent in English. In stress accent languages, you stress a certain syllable, like stress. On the other hand, with pitch accent in Japanese, mora, which is a kind of syllable, sounds either high or low. Stress. So it's quite different from stress accent, and it plays an important role in Japanese. For example, ame is shown like this and ame is shown like this. Ame is candy and ame is rain. The pitch accent difference can sometimes lead to a different meaning like this, but most of the time it just sounds unnatural. The proper pitch accent of ryoko is ryoko, but if you say it as ryoko, it means the same thing, but it sounds unnatural and sometimes be hard to understand. Why I'm telling you this is I'd like you to be aware of pitch accent, the Japanese accent. A proper accent makes your Japanese sound natural. So please note that the Japanese language has pitch accent, and when you consume a lot of Japanese content, please consume pitch accent too. You'll learn about the basic concept of pitch accent from this video. There are 4 patterns for nouns and 2 patterns for verbs and adjectives, but at this point, you don't have to memorize those patterns. If you just start immersion, you just need to be aware of the existence of pitch accent. Once you get used to hearing pitch accent and intonation, it's best to learn about them. It is often said you have to learn the pitch accent of words one by one, so it sounds very random and there are no rules or patterns. But actually, there are rules and patterns. If you have this knowledge, you'll understand that the only random part is which nouns or verbs follow which patterns. You then realize this is the part you'll have to learn one by one, and immersion helps with it. Having the knowledge of pitch accent and intonation and other aspects of Japanese phonetics is like lighting your path. You'll know where you are and where you're going. So I think it really helps to learn about them. That's why I made my subscription course, so you can learn them in it. If you're interested in, the link is in the description. There's another thing I recommend. When you watch something, I recommend you softly repeat the words or phrases you hear. When you do that, try to imitate their pitch accent too. The same applies to intonation. Now let's talk about when and how you can apply immersion to your daily routine. If you are a complete beginner, you need to sit down and watch content with 100% focus. So you need to find time. And how much time do you need? The longer, the better. But please don't be discouraged if you have less than an hour a day. It's better than nothing. Consume content as much as possible, and at the same time, try to learn new words and grammar, which will actually improve your understanding. The important thing is find your favorite content that you can listen to multiple times and try to listen as much as possible. That will deepen your understanding of the content, thus improving your Japanese skills. Once you get used to consuming a lot of content and you start understanding things, you can start passive immersion. It depends on how you feel. If you feel comfortable listening to content while doing something else, meaning you can understand it enough, passive immersion will work for you. Now you can do immersion for much longer. You can listen to content while doing house chore, exercise, or something else. I always listen to English podcasts while driving. The important thing for people at any level is that you need to find a content that you really enjoy. It doesn't matter what it is, but it has to be interesting to you. Also, the level is important. You need to choose the content that suits your level. It might take some time to find appropriate content to watch, but it's natural. As your skills improve, you'll have more content to choose from. Lastly, let me talk about reading. Reading is a great way to expand your vocabulary and grammar. If you like reading, reading is one of the great ways to immerse yourself in the language. One thing to note is that you need to read something interesting to you. If you find a book not that interesting to you, you shouldn't keep reading even if you paid for it. Don't force yourself to read something if you don't feel like it, otherwise you might end up stopping learning. Your motivation is more important than your money. For immersion learning, motivation is the key. Nurture your motivation with content you love. Now is the time to start. And if you're feeling motivated and ready to get started, please like and subscribe to the channel. I always share a comment at the very end of a video. Today, I'd like to share this comment from Ero Kishima-san. I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm sorry. Let me read the part in the middle. Just like pitch accent, knowing there the intonation of the whole sentence, layered along with the pitch accent for words, is very helpful to be aware of. And I think immersion, exposure, will help a lot. That's right, immersion will help a lot. Next part. Also, it's hard to put into words, but the way of seeing the additional information and looking at context and sort of thinking of what might be said or next, it really made some things click. Thank you. This is very important. Some people say Japanese is hard to understand because you won't know if a sentence will end with mas positively or masen negatively until at the very end of a sentence. That's true, but usually you can guess. So it's not that complicated unless the speaker is trying to confuse you. Thank you for your comment. Let's end the video here. See you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.